Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I am here today at the Rock Island Auction House. I'm taking a look at some of the guns that they're selling in their upcoming December of 2015 premiere auction. Now, we've already looked at two different semi-auto rifles developed by J.C. White in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and this is the third of them. Now, this one's kind of an oddball in that it was apparently designed by White to be a light machine gun, but it doesn't really have very many characteristics of a light machine gun. It kind of looks like it was an earlier developmental gun of his that he found more easily adapted to a magazine feed and decided to adapt it to sort of a light machine gun role in trials. Now, this rifle was never looked at by the American military, but when White went to the United Kingdom in 1932, he took this rifle along with his two semi-auto rifles, his gas-operated long-stroke piston rifle and also his short recoil toggle action rifle. And he presented this to the British along with those two. The British had a number of things to say about this, none of them particularly complimentary. Basically, this rifle is not nearly developed enough to deserve a place in a military trial. So the British tested it out. It has a number of weird features to it, or very early type of features to it. Primarily the fact that the gas piston here is kind of bolted onto the side of the rifle. In his gas piston semi-auto rifle, he puts the piston underneath the barrel, and it's a much cleaner, much more elegant design. In this one, it's kind of kludged on the side, similar to what we see with some early bolt-action rifle conversion designs. Now, that being said, the rifle worked. It worked reasonably well. The problems the British had were things like it was meant to be a light machine gun. That's how it was presented to them. But first off, it was actually only semi-automatic. So this is not an NFA item. It's a semi-auto rifle. It also didn't have any provision built in for a bipod or a tripod, which is, you need at least one of the two, preferably both, for a proper light machine gun. Now, the British liked the simplicity of how this system worked, but they had some problems with the details. The camming surfaces that actually allow the gas piston to move the bolt, the British said those were far too small and they wouldn't stand up to the rigors of long-term military use, and so they wanted to see that improved. The gas piston system itself is actually kind of clever and interesting, and we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. So in general, this pseudo-light machine gun is pretty similar in function to White's gas-operated rifle. A few technical differences to it, and actually, why don't we just go ahead and take a closer look at those right now. So one area where White did get this right for a light machine gun was, instead of using end block clips, this uses detachable box magazines. Specifically, this uses BAR magazines. Now, our magazine release clearly is back here. However, this magazine is a very tight fit in the gun, and I don't want to try and force it out, so I'm just going to leave it there for the time being. A few other controls here. We have a safety, which is a cross the trigger type design. Push in there to fire, push back out for safe. Our charging handle is attached directly to the gas piston here. So if you remember White's gas-operated rifle that we took a look at, it had a locking block that lifted up when the action cycled. Now in the rifle, the locking block was at the very front of the bolt. In this light machine gun version, the locking block is actually at the rear. And when I run the bolt handle, you can see that locking block right here, lifting up and cycling backwards. There is the front of our bolt. Now, I can't prove it conclusively, but I'm pretty sure that this was actually an open bolt firing semi-auto rifle. And the reason I say that is once the bolt is up here in firing position, it's entirely located over the magazine, and there's no mechanical connection to it at all that I can find. What we have back here is our trigger. So when I pull the trigger, you can see that sear dropping down, and it resets when you pull the trigger all the way. So that, I believe, drops the bolt. When the bolt closes up here, it automatically locks and fires. and then reciprocates and locks open again, ready to fire the next shot when you pull the trigger again. An open bolt action like this would kind of be expected on a light machine gun. That allows the barrel to stay cool, and if you've done a lot of firing, that prevents you from ever being in a situation where you have a live round loaded in the chamber in a very hot chamber that sits there long enough to actually fire just from heat, a process called cooking off. So normally on a light machine gun, you would expect to have a quick change detachable barrel, and I think largely because this gas piston is bolted onto the barrel all the way back to here, White didn't do that. He has a fixed barrel on this gun, which is something that the British noticed and complained about. But I believe what he had set up was a fixed barrel with an open bolt action to enhance cooling and prevent cook-offs. All right, let's take a look at the muzzle end of this rifle. We have our gas port right here. That's the only place where the gas piston and the barrel are connected. Actually, something interesting to note is we have a Springfield Arsenal marked, US bomb marked, 1916 dated barrel on this rifle. And yet we know this was made in the late 20s or early 30s. That's an interesting artifact of the fact that rifle inventors like White could apply to be given barrels by the US military. So the military was, over this time period, they were looking for new rifle designs, and as a way to help facilitate that, one of the more difficult components to make in sort of a home shop or an amateur workshop would be an actual rifled barrel. So the military would provide barrels to legitimate inventors to let them avoid the problem of having to rifle their own barrels. Anyway, so White got this barrel in that way. Now, neither of the barrels on his other two rifles are marked in this way. This, again, goes to kind of support the idea that this particular light machine gun was one of his first developments before he had better mechanical setups for doing his own barrels. Anyway, our gas piston comes out here. This is an unusual and interesting design of a gas piston. We do have an adjustable regulator here. And then, let's see, if you want to take the gas piston off, you unscrew this nut all the way. Once that's off, you then unscrew some bits at the back end, and the whole gas piston slides forward out of its mounting points. So I mention that only because this is a simple piece to remove. All right, now the front end of the gas piston also unthreads, like so. This is actually kind of the working end of the gas piston. Now, I am going to close the bolt. All right, I have now closed the bolt, and you can see that the gas piston is protruding forward. So we have this weird situation, unusual design, where the gas port is here, but the head of the piston appears to be out here. Well, this piston is actually hollow. You can see down inside it right there. And what happens is there is a hole in the piston here, and when you fire, gas builds up inside the whole length of this piston. It's capped off by this right there. Once that whole piston fills up, then pressure of the gas against this end cap pushes the whole assembly backward, and that cuts off the gas piston, or the gas port, preventing any further gas from getting into the system. This is one of the first iterations of this sliding cutoff gas system that White came up with, which eventually would be used in the M14 rifle. So it's a clever idea, and this is clearly an early developmental iteration of it. It's also interesting to point out that there is, in fact, a bayonet lug on this rifle, and it fits a standard 1903 pattern bayonet, which I happen to have here. If I can. Sling swivels in the way. There we go. So, light machine gun with a bayonet. Very Japanese inspired there. Now, one other element that's kind of clever on this that I want to point out, you'll see we have these holes on a lot of the parts. And we see them especially back here. We have this adjustment on the end of our operating rod. This is actually nice and loose. I can take this out and show it to you at the moment. This, I believe, is a spring buffer. The bolt hits that and it absorbs the energy, whatever energy is left in the travel of the bolt. But again, we have around the circumference of this piece all of these little round holes. Well, the end of our gas port cap has this round stud on it, which perfectly fits those holes. This is intended as a disassembly tool for everything else on the rifle. And in fact, you can see that it's a little bit bent from people using it for about 75 years. So that's a cool feature. Not as good as not needing tools, but better than needing a special tool that isn't permanently mounted to the rifle. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is certainly an oddball piece of rifle history to take a look at. Never tested by the US military. It was tested by the British, but clearly needed a lot more development before it could go anywhere. So if this is something that you would like to have yourself, I don't think there's any reason you couldn't actually go ahead and shoot this. This is in .30-06 caliber. If you take a look at the link in the text description below, that'll take you to Rock Island Auction House's catalog page on this rifle, and you can take a look at their pictures and their description and all their background material, and place a bid right there online if you'd like to own it. So thanks for watching and good luck.